The Eiffel Tower, the Milan Cathedral, New York City, devoid of tourists. In 2020, the world went into lockdown. In Wuhan, central China, a new coronavirus had emerged. The disease was named COVID-19.
COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
As of mid-December 2020, the novel coronavirus spread to more than 180 countries, infected more than 71 million people, and killed more than 1.6 million. Most governments around the world were at a loss for how to contain the infection and ordered everyone to just stay home. While much of the world was at a standstill, in Taiwan, international marathons and parades were taking place. People were able to go to school and work. It was pretty much life as usual. From mid-April to the end of 2020, there were 0 local cases of COVID-19. The secret is in Taiwan's public health system. Grace Liao is a veteran news presenter who knows key decision makers.
我们能帮全世界什么样的忙？
And Alan Lian, a medical doctor and public health expert.
AI 大数据怎么样在这个 COVID-19 这次的疫情做出贡献？
They're on a mission to uncover Taiwan's secrets. They will uncover and share how Taiwan has been able to emerge as a global leader in beating COVID-19. Like all biological organisms, viruses strive to climb to the top of the food chain. In 2019, a new virus emerged. From the coronavirus family, it was named Coronavirus 2. The name of the disease, COVID-19. Its organ of choice, the lungs. It first burst onto the scene in Wuhan and spread to the rest of the world in record time.
他在还没有发病的前2天，他就去感染性。
That it is a new disease, a disease that this world has not seen before.
就一发不可收拾，变成全球的大流行。
2020 was a year defined by the virus. 3 months was all it took to spread all over the map, terrorizing and making headlines around the world. But Taiwan also made news around the world for beating it.
The COVID-19 crisis has reminded us all that Taiwan has a great deal to be proud of on the world stage.
我们就用追踪、隔离跟社交距离这几个政策彻底的执行，就取代了普筛跟封城。
0 lockdowns, 0 community infections since April 12th, 7 deaths total.
My name is Grace Liao. I'm a journalist. To find out how border control is fighting the battle, I have invited Alan Lian, a former medical officer at Taiwan Centers for Disease Control, to join me in investigating what goes on here at Taiwan's first line of defense.
This is Taiwan's Taoyuan International Airport, the entry port to Taiwan. There are direct flights from Wuhan, China every day. The trip is merely 2.5 hours.
Alan meets Jolene Luo, a registered nurse and CDC quarantine officer on the battlefront.
COVID-19 确诊的病人的时候，我们就会把他带到我们下一关检疫站进行评估。
Luo and her team have the dangerous job of interviewing passengers arriving in Taiwan already showing symptoms of COVID-19.
有小朋友，来，稍等一下哈，谢谢。
Gloves, masks, goggles, gowns. Everyone covers as much of themselves as possible to prevent getting infected in case any of these passengers are carriers of the highly contagious disease.
请问有人14天内有不舒服的，身体有任何不舒服的，请举手好吗？14天内。那填写好的话，麻烦举手让我知道，我请工作人员去协助你。
先帮我坐着一下哈，帮我坐这边。
有咳嗽，
有发烧跟咳嗽，哎，有咳嗽。等一下，我先助你一下哈。
Anyone arriving in Taiwan feeling unwell receives a test right away.
然后去我们的采检站啊，因为
是有症状的旅客，而且因为菲律宾也是刚好是登革热疫区，如果曾经有肌肉酸痛、头痛，我们也会采检，以防止境外的登革热移入。
就整个边境防疫的检疫措施来讲，大概要经过哪些步骤？
While Alan Lian talks with frontline medical teams, Grace Liao, a journalist with 30 years of experience, meets with Chen Zhongyan, deputy director of the Central Epidemic Command Center, to see how coronavirus testing is conducted at the airport.
采检人员在里面动线分流，受采检的人就开门进去。
所以这个设备也全部都是医疗专业的考量吗？
是，这整个内部的空间完全是依照医疗的等级来去做设计跟处理的。
那所以医生现在是一个负压病房，
是负压的区域，所以医生相对于过往轻松多了啦。 又有比较舒适的空间，然后又可以，然后一次呢，我们做了5间，那我们将旅客跟采检的医师完全把它隔离开。
这边是医师，
这边是医师。
采检完之后，必须4、5个小时才知道，这个时候他怎么去安排他？
旅客我们就会安排他到这个搭乘防疫专车，还是进到这个集中检疫场所。我们目前是有170几例，都是在机场的采检的时候就拦下来。 所以所占的比例，按照我们现在的确诊案例来讲，其实所占比例非常高。那尤其是后端，几乎全部都是在边境的这个采检就把它拦下来。
The test result for one of the passengers came back positive, and the person was immediately taken to a hospital.
我们当时是判定，武汉肺炎是类 SARS 的疾病，所以。 我们就超前部署，在我们的桃园机场跟小港机场，作为边境管制优先要处理的部分。因为当时从武汉的飞机飞往世界各地的班机的分布来看，东京、曼谷跟台北是风险最高的3个地区，所以我们就立刻采取行动。尤其全世界那个时候都还没有开始进行边境管制。
Before passengers even land in Taiwan, epidemic control measures are already in place for passengers to let the CDC know that they've arrived. This is the first firewall to shut out the virus.
Before you even board onto the plane, you have to go to the website of Ministry of Health and Welfare, fill out forms that tells the government where you have been to, and what symptoms you have over the past weeks, and where you're going to be home quarantined after you arrive.
Checking in with the CDC is as simple as scanning the code and tapping the green button. People who don't have a working cell phone in Taiwan can rent one for 14 days of quarantine for 60 new Taiwan dollars, or just over $2 US a day.
When COVID-19 started to spread in Wuhan, it was the worst timing for us. It was a Lunar New Year when people travel home for holidays, when Taiwanese businessmen and their families will return to Taiwan. At that time, Taiwan was possibly the area most at risk of an epidemic outside of mainland China. But Taiwan was able to prevent COVID-19 from taking over the island, surprising the world.
The odds were against Taiwan, both in terms of timing and due to its exclusion from the world's foremost public health body.
They were not receiving information from, official multilateral sources, and so they were left to their own devices. Then they detected that there was some social media flurry that was going on in Wuhan.
Last December 31st, and we found that it is an emerging and unexpected dangerous situation. So we sent email to World Health Organization and China CDC. On the same day, we already started our border control for all those direct inbound passengers from Wuhan.
How was the government able to set up efficient safeguards against the virus so quickly, so early on? Grace talks to President Tsai Ing-wen to find out.
我们认为它这个是一个国安的挑战，要成立一个中央的疫情的指挥中心，让部长自己亲自带领这个指挥中心。那换句话说，我们已经确认了，就由陈时中部长作为前线指挥的这个最重要的人。所以我们建立起来一个很好的行为的模式，就是没有政治的决定在里面，一切都是以专业以防疫 为最重要的原则。
2月6号开始，我们实施以健保卡实名制来购买口罩。
因为不知道而恐惧，因为恐惧而造成对立，让很多的政策都很难去施行的很贯彻。所以这次我们在一开始就设定在一个很重要的目标，就怎么样让社会能够不要恐慌，那就是要让他们了解，了解得清楚。那这是后来我们决定要来开记者会，每一天都很透明的，就是让人民建立跟政府这样的一个信心，就是说你消息你都会知道，那政府跟人民站在一起，我们一起来抗疫。
If you successfully pass this checkpoint, welcome to Taiwan. This is really one of the world's most secure airports, not by police power, but by epidemic prevention power.
Next, when COVID does get past the tightest epidemic airport security measures in the world, what happens? A taxi driver gets infected by a passenger who had just returned from China and spreads it to his family, causing the first community outbreak in Taiwan. Epidemic investigators scrambled to find out where the virus came from and how to contain the outbreak. The bubonic plague, smallpox, influenza, and now COVID. Disease has been man's #1 killer throughout history, killing millions and wiping out massive portions of the population at a time.
In the 1800s, there was an outbreak of cholera. The field of epidemiology and public health arose partly to investigate how the disease spreads.
Human beings have been fighting disease since before history was recorded. But Grace Liao and Alan Lien are finding that public health as a field of study has been around for less than 200 years. Ever since then, humans have been struggling to catch up with diseases. In less than 100 days, it had made its way to every single continent except Antarctica. No virus has ever traveled so quickly. January 2020, in central Taiwan, over the Lunar New Year holiday, a taxi driver thought he might have caught a cold.
我们过年前就安排讲要聚餐嘛，大家欢欢喜喜，是讲连续搭一天，初三，大家规家好就拢真欢喜来，大家咧快快乐乐啦，过一天尔就开始咧扫啦，有胃寒啦，搁过一天尔，去你楼顶就无再落来。
The symptoms got worse, and he was rushed to the hospital emergency room, where he was tested for COVID-19.
无2天就插管啦，插管了，逐天去，逐天听到消息，一天比一天较歹。
我想大种啊，哪人感冒会安怎？哪人佫无会无救
？Test results came back the day he died, showing that he was positive for the virus. Family members were heartbroken over the loss of their loved one, but their ordeal was only just beginning. They also tested positive. Taiwan was in danger of a major outbreak. Before all the border control measures were in place, the virus had crept in, claiming its first victim and causing the first community infection in the country. But who gave the virus to the taxi driver? And who else could have been infected? This is Su Jiabing, a CDC medical officer and an old colleague of Alan Lien's. He updates Alan on what the job now requires and how he traced the driver's contacts.
所以我们一般来到这个病房，主要是要想了解他发病前14天他的一个活动史，因为我们想了解他的来源。
Su Jiabing and local health authorities quickly opened an investigation to uncover and contain the outbreak in central Taiwan.
好，那这个动线是只有救护车会过来吗？
只有救护车专用。那我会到我们的7号电梯。
可能在当地会不会已经造成一个群聚事件，已经有很多人感染，那这个情况会比较难以处理，所以当时是对于这个部分会很紧张。
重症区的部分在最角角的角落。
OK， 所以是这个。可是我们可能要知道他旁边那段时间有没有其他人去接触到他。我们透过看这个监视器的时候，也确实发现有隔壁床的家属有来跟他聊天接触的状况，也有比较靠近的床位的病患，我们就是去了解这旁边几个病患目前的住院状况。那甚至我们也帮他裁剪，好避免这个病毒有这个传出去的这样的情况。那当然我们就会先看一下。那隔离病房里面的状况， 那通常我要看一下它的负压值啊，现在都有这样的规定，
确认它的负压。
对。
所以我们现在大概知道哦，从这个白牌司机的住院日期往前推哈，我们大概推估它是1月25号开始是它的发病期，所以它的感染源一定来自前面14天的潜伏期，就是1月25号。
再往前推，它
推14天。那因为他是司机嘛，你第一个一定猜想说，一定是有什么人从这个大陆回来坐他的车。
我们有拿到他的手机，然后也有看到他的手机里面的通联记录，我们会针对这些通联记录做一个调查，看看有没有从国外回来疑似跟他有接触的个案。
To facilitate contact tracing, police provided phone records of the driver, and the team cross-referenced calls made from near the airport and hotels with medical records from the National Health Insurance Administration. By 4 p.m. that day, they had narrowed their search down to 3 people, any one of whom could have been patient 0. Su Jiaobing creates a timeline looking at the driver's 14-day incubation period. On January 22nd, the driver had been to the airport to pick up a man returning from China, and this man's health insurance data shows several visits to the doctor.
我们就主动去联络这几个个案，请教他说：“请问你是不是某年某月有从这个机场回来？然后是不是有坐一个车子？”确认之后，我们再跟他解释说，我们因为有这样的状况，那我们可能要对你做进一步的访问，然后呢，甚至做一些检验。
But when the lead suspect was tested for coronavirus, the results came back negative.
Grace asks Zhongshang Chuan, a leading expert on infectious diseases, also the chairman of the CECC Expert Consultation Committee, why?
白牌司机爆发时，尤其在社区感染方面，是不是可能会因此失手？
那可是这些因为都已经我们等于是2月中去追1月底的事情，那些人其实症状也都已经好了，现在病毒没了，核酸检测不出来，可是他身体里面已经出现有抗体，那他确实有跟他有接触过，在他的载客的车程里面，他确实有咳嗽的状况，而且他们都没有戴口罩。
All the missing pieces were found. Outbreak contained. Epidemic investigation. Case closed. It seemed COVID-19 had met a dead end, but it quickly found an even better strategy: the Trojan horse. Next, a cruise liner of more than 3,000 vacationers potentially infected with the new coronavirus lands in Taiwan. No one knew about the infections until after they'd been all over Taipei. The border controls had been breached once again, putting Taiwan's contact tracing to the test on a much larger scale. This time, Taiwan has to resort to technology and big data to pinpoint potentially infected people and avoid a lockdown. The new virus that causes COVID-19 is from the coronavirus family. Corona is Latin for crown, which the spike proteins on the virus resemble.
病毒它是一种所谓的 RNA 病毒，也就是说它有一种复制酶，做错了就算了，所以可以想象说它有很多的突变会累积起来，这是容易突变的病毒。所以这几个月来呢，它从刚开始跳到人类身上来，那就一直不断的突变。那显然现在有一个比较大的突变，它变得更容易传播，所以就一发不可收拾啊。
Wherever people are in close contact, the virus spreads fast. In 14 days, SARS-CoV-2 infected 1/5 of all the passengers on the Diamond Princess cruise ship. My Joshua and his father were on the disease-stricken cruise liner and recalled the horror.
2月9号的时候，就开始觉得爸爸的咳嗽越来越严重，他开始一直跟我 complain 说，我没办法睡觉，我一直咳血，一直有点血丝，越看越不对劲，因为他开始咳血、流鼻血，又开始真的很不舒服。
Quarantined off the port of Yokohama in Japan. This was the Diamond Princess in February, when it was confirmed that a passenger who had got off the ship in Hong Kong tested positive for COVID-19. More than 3,000 people were ordered to stay in their cabins. No one could leave the ship.
忽然间那一天 好像135人确诊，就忽然间船上的确诊人数忽然间暴增，再来爸爸咳嗽真的咳得很严重了，而且流鼻血又流得很多，整个垃圾桶都是血。
Mai Joshua and his father ended up among the more than 700 passengers who contracted the virus before being taken to hospitals in Japan. But before the ship became a diseased vessel that port authorities refused docking permission, it had made a stop in Taiwan, where more than 3,000 passengers and crew got off to explore Taipei.
3000个人下来，那怎么做疫调呢？他们的旅行社所有的资料，看他们去哪边旅游，这个是传统的疫情调查嘛。没有坐计程车，没有游览车，其他没有资料的话，那我们怎么去找呢？大概还有3000人，只有问了几百个人有资料，其他2000个人没有资料，那怎么办呢？后来就想要用手机的资料。
The virus played the oldest trick in the book, the Trojan horse, and Taiwan countered by using big data technology. Grace heads to the Executive Yuan's Department of Cybersecurity to find out how the strategy worked and how contact tracing for thousands of people at a time was carried out using cell phone signals. But first, the system needed to know which numbers to track.
一个简单的方式可能是跟船公司要他名单，可是这个其实旷日费时。电信业者告诉我们说，其实只要一只手机打开，就算是国外的手机，它也会跟当地的基地台做注册的一个动作，所以就会知道有这些号码。
Cross-referencing cell phone signals originating on the Diamond Princess's path of travel during its time in Taiwan, they were able to narrow down the search to about 3,000 numbers. The cell phone signals were then backtraced. Data experts found more than 30 places where the vacationers stayed for more than half an hour and cross-referenced that with local cell phone number signals that stayed for more than 5 minutes within a 500-meter radius to find people that could have been exposed.
钻石公主号3000多个游客，其实他们到过30几个景点
，30几个地方，所以不是只是在基隆港附近来游玩，不止。
没有，不止。我们总共找出62万个国内的民众。
62万人。
是，所以其实非常的多。哇！只要跟他在一起，大概停留超过5分钟，就有可能受到影响。
5分钟。
是。所以我们就利用细胞简讯，针对这个范围，发布细胞简讯。
If any of the 620,000 people became ill and went to see a doctor in the following week since potential contact with the Diamond Princess passengers, they would be automatically flagged by the system.
那这些资料怎么使用？那怎么做保密？这个其实在个人资料保护法还有我们的传染病防治法都有规定。
Vice Premier Chen Chi-mai is also head of the Cybersecurity Department and a physician trained in public health. In May, he co-authored a paper published in the Journal of Medical Internet Research on how Taiwan used big data analytics to prevent a massive community outbreak.
用大数据来做防疫，在流行病学的研究来看，它开启了一个新的视野。
While Grace looked at how contact tracing can track down people, I'm here to find out if big data and AI can track down virus too.
This is a phylogenetic tree of all known cases of SARS-CoV-2 with genetic sequencing. It traces the ancestry and mutations of the virus to help speed up the search for better treatments. At this artificial intelligence lab, machine learning is also applied to the diagnosis of COVID-19. Chest x-rays were given to the AI system to learn what pneumonia looks like. This is an x-ray of a sick patient.
那所以第一件事情，他可以先看说，哪些地方可能是 pneumonia 的发病区。那在这个 mask 上面可以看到，它这边越亮的地方，就代表它越认为是就是发病的区域，就 lesion 的地方。
不同的病例、不同的生活习性、不同的环境，它的预防、预测、检测、预疗、治疗、预后都会不一样的时候，我们一定是会需要有这种人工智慧大数据在后面去做支持。
With a virus that mutates so quickly, it's a race against time. If machine learning can help accelerate the speed at which humans respond for diagnosis and treatment, the war may tilt in our favor. But the battle fire is still raging, and people are returning to Taiwan infected with the new coronavirus. Next, a young woman with COVID-19 comes back from Spain. She is treated at a busy hospital for more than a month. Could the virus have found another opportunity to cause an outbreak? The fight continues.
真的不要得这个病，真的不好玩。
A virus that causes respiratory illnesses. The new coronavirus often attacks the lungs, often resulting in pneumonia.
那有一部分人会出现肺炎的现象，那有一部分人会变成很严重的肺炎、呼吸衰竭，甚至死亡。
那另外还有一个不明的原因哈，现在还大家在研究，就是说这个病毒感染以后会引起一个凝血上面机制的异常，所以常常会有血栓的产生。那这个血栓发生在心脏或是脑部的话，就是致命性的。
To find out how COVID-19 patients are treated, Grace Liao and Alan Lien visit a hospital where they also learn how cluster infections are prevented.
After the painful experience with SARS many years ago, hospital security against infectious diseases were tightened and a new firewall was created.
And that firewall is in this piece of plastic, the National Health Insurance card.
Information, including the name of the hospital visited and the prescriptions prescribed, are stored on this card. This is how the system can flag and keep track of flagged patients. This is Rita Chow, a young woman who is studying in Spain. But in March 2020, when her cold seemed to not go away, she decided to return to Taiwan to be treated.
我从2月中就开始干咳。 然后那时候是咳到我都没办法睡觉，只要一躺下我就开始咳嗽，所以我必须要侧着睡或是坐着睡觉。家人也就是开始很担心，但是那时候已经开始有蛮多的疫情，连西班牙也是开始有了，所以就在西班牙锁国前，我们赶快订机票回来。回台湾一落地，我主动的跟检疫人员说我想要检验，因为我已经有症状很久。再隔1天。 就被通知说我确诊了，很错愕，因为我在西班牙2次的就医结果都是流感。
When Rita arrived at the hospital, she was led on an isolated patient flow to a negative pressure isolation room.
确诊个案他从急诊室过来的话，他第一件事情就是从急诊室坐这个专用电梯到隔离病房，我们的护理师他会在着装。 然后在这边接病人，沿着这个动线，我们会拉好管制线以后，就让个案就是一路走到我们的负压隔离病房。
The pressure inside the negative pressure room is lower than the non-contaminated space outside. So when a door is open, air only goes one way, in. The air is then sent out and away from the hospital.
然后说啊。
Treating patients in an isolation room, doctors communicate over the phone to minimize direct contact.
瑞塔刚进来的时候，那个时候她主要的症状其实还是咳嗽跟胸口会有一点闷的状况。右边肺部的 X 光片在横膈上面的地方有一点肺炎的这个 patch， 看起来像是在右下肺叶那个地方是有发炎的。
真的不要得这个病，真的不好玩。 以前我也觉得我不会是得的那个人，结果我中。
In the SARS outbreak of 2002-2003, over 800 people around the world were killed by the virus. In Taiwan, 73 people succumbed to the disease. Many of the infections happened within a single hospital. The cluster of infections was accidentally caused by hospital cleaning staff. New protocols and negative pressure rooms were part of the effort to reform public health policy after the incident.
Including the amendment of the Communicable Disease Control Act and restructuring of Taiwan CDC and Ministry of Health, and also strengthen this hospital infection control in all the hospitals and put this into the accreditation of hospital. And it's very important. And also we establish our emerging infectious disease healthcare system in Taiwan. And we also request all the hospitals to prepare at least 1 month quota of this personal protection equipment.
Alan talks to the head nurse of an isolation room ward and finds out what's changed.
就定有就是这样子很大规模的感染事件的这种演习计划。
新兴传染病的
新兴传染病的演习，
对 ，COVID 来以前就已经有。
是每年都会做这样的演习。其实 CDC 很快就会给我们guideline，而且是很明确的，像这个都已经到第8版，提供国际上最新的医疗的讯息。
A strong epidemic prevention system lies not only on public health measures, but also on a robust healthcare system that can receive and treat the patients and prevent them from infecting the communities.
What prevents healthcare workers from getting infected and infecting the community is PPE, personal protective equipment. To the layman, they're just layers of textiles. But how complicated are they to put on? How much harder does it make treating patients? Grace tries on a full set of PPE to find out.
这边要很紧很紧是正常的吗？对，很紧是正常的，真的无法呼吸的，非常非常闷，太令人敬佩了。我还没有进去工作，我都觉得这么闷。那进去工作之后一直带，
一直带着，
一直带着，
带到我们看完每个病人，然后做完治疗出来。
医护人员可以想见有多辛苦啊，真的是太令人感动了。
其实我是害怕传染给孩子，所以那时候我有一度不想回家，我就是想要住在医院。我的孩子就会好像知道说我是处在于很不安全的状态，所以他们也是很担心，所以他才会大哭，然后就跟我说我不想你死掉。
甚至是打扫的阿姨，他们也要全副武装，就是穿2层防护衣，然后2层口罩、护目镜这样进来。我就觉得，台湾这些医护人员真的很伟大。我的味觉跟嗅觉基本上是丧失的，但是现在有在慢慢恢复中。我觉得隐隐约约是有尝到那个油的味道。
After a month of treatment, Rita tested negative for the virus 3 times and was cleared to finally go home. But what is Taiwan doing to help contain the spread of COVID from all international inbound travelers? Designated taxis and buses straight to quarantine locations could be the answer. When a traveler arrives in Taiwan, they are required to self-quarantine for a full 2 weeks, the time it takes for the virus to reveal itself. From the airport, they take a special disease prevention taxi or bus straight to their registered quarantine location. For people who can't quarantine at home, epidemic prevention centers and hotels are 2 other options. Alan Lien visits a hotel in Taipei that can accommodate travelers who need to be quarantined.
我听说一开始的时候会有个护理站的这个地方。
是的，没错。那我来跟你介绍一下，当初我们在这边设了2个户外的护理站，在廊道跟地钉它是地带，所以我们皮肤的另外一个物质是可以让我们彻底做消毒。现在我们不能跟它接触，所以我们会在特定约定好的时间替他们送餐。那干净的食物跟干净的用品，或者他们在 Uber Eats 打订的时候，就会在这个置物篮里。单向来，他只能按他的楼层，来的时候也只有这个门可以被打开。那他进来之后，他没有房卡，所以他出去他是会进不来的。那我们就可以控制他的动向。
This is Ansi Ferve, a quarantine guest at the hotel.
Good morning, dear friends. I am Ansi Ferve, a German conductor and pianist, and I have the good fortune to be in Taiwan as conductor and vocal coach for La Bohème, a production at the National Taichung Opera. Oh, yes! Be jealous, be very jealous. This is one of the fabulous breakfasts that Hans Haus has served me. It is an absolute joy to work in Taiwan during this pandemic. The natural, professional, friendly, efficient way of dealing with this virus has inspired me to not be discouraged about life or my career.
Ansi completed her quarantine, abiding the law. But Grace asks, what if someone violates quarantine orders? A question that brings her to the police department. Digital fencing measures are in place to make sure people under quarantine take the matter seriously. Their location is monitored during the 2-week period. If the fence is broken, the police are alerted.
你现在收到一通那个防疫手机的那个已离开居家范围的案，我现在传给你哦。
好，收到。
在这次疫调当中，台北市勤务指挥中心扮演什么样的角色呢？
我们台北市勤务指挥中心主要是扮演一个讯息汇整的角色。那比如说像我们如果接到疫调中心有一些异常个案的通报，我们就会启动调查，我们就会透过我们的监视器的画面去调阅它周遭一个附近的这个状况，监视器的状况。 那去厘清它移动的这个轨迹，它接触的人、接触的车，那把完整疫调的状况回报给疫调中心去做进一步的处置。
The fine for breaking quarantine can go as high as 1 million new Taiwan dollars, over $35,000 US.
Of course, there are some trade-offs. The trade-off is either that, or we have to do potentially more severe measures, such as quarantine of or lockdown of an entire city, for example. I think Taiwan's one of the few places where they're actually seeing economic growth due to their ability to control COVID-19.
In the first 11 months of 2020, around 400,000 people were quarantined or self-isolated for 14 days. Facilitated by digital fencing, enforced by the law, the compliance rate for quarantine is 99.7%, and no lockdowns have been ordered. Outside of quarantine, everyone else goes about their business as usual, but wearing masks. In Taiwan, it has been common sense to put on a medical mask for self-protection when there is something going around. Medical face masks made in Taiwan have at least a 95% filtration rate. The petri dishes show bacteria cultured from the first and third layers. There is significantly less bacteria found on the layer closest to the person wearing the mask. The key is the middle layer, which is made of an electrostatically charged microfiber that traps particles which make it past the outside layers. If PPE, including medical masks, are properly worn, the risk of infection is quite low. But soon after the outbreak in Wuhan, masks sold out almost instantly.
在库存的4500万个口罩，那因为在过年期间，那这个口罩的需求量其实非常高，一下子大概就消耗大概2/3的口罩的数量，因为有一些民众怕说以后买不到口罩，所以就造成疯狂的抢购，所以口罩的数量就严重的减少。
With almost no masks to be found, Taiwan was under serious threat of community outbreaks. But in a matter of weeks, Taiwan was able to multiply its mask production rate more than tenfold, from about 1.9 million to 20 million a day, enough to provide masks for everyone in Taiwan and have more left over to share with the world. Masks began to fly off the shelves in Taiwan as soon as news of COVID broke. The hoarding and shortage of supply was a big problem. To make sure everyone was able to buy masks for protection against COVID-19, the government rationed them. People were required to use their national health insurance card to register and order masks. Parts and materials for production lines immediately needed to be sourced and built. Fortunately, Taiwan has strong textile and manufacturing industries, but someone needed to bring them together. Grace joins Shen Zheng-Chin, Taiwan's Minister of Economic Affairs, to visit a brand new mask factory built during the pandemic to find out how they got up and running in record time.
农历年那段时间，这一个经济部被赋予这个任务，我们就定了一个叫做统一征用、统一调控、统一售价。口罩的产能一盘点出来呢，大概每天有420万片。那至少呢，我们每天要有1000万片的口罩出来。所以在这样的情况之下，大概呢要有60台的机器设备。
60 production lines were needed, but only 20 were available in all of Taiwan, and it usually took an entire month to assemble one. Shen hoped to have 40 assembly lines up and running in a mere 20 days.
几家工具机的业者就到部里面来跟我谈，他说他们愿意帮忙20几家的厂商来分配任务，要来帮政府这个忙。
Unexpectedly, competing tooling and machining companies stepped forward and announced a collaboration, bringing workers and machinery to help the mask factories, but not without sacrifices, as Grace finds out.
这边原来就是一个绿板，就这样子，
绿地板这样，
绿地板而已，
完全空旷的绿地板这样，一直就希望说赶快把这个口罩机器完整啊，所有人都是拼命在做这样子，因为我们不想说。 看到很多人在排队买口罩这样子。
The result was, in weeks' time, anyone who had a national health insurance card could buy 9 surgical masks every 2 weeks, and enough was left over to donate to other countries. By June, stores were fully stocked and restrictions were lifted.
这是刚刚才生产出来的口罩。 在动员这么多人力状况底下所完成的口罩的生产线，所生产出来的口罩，我觉得戴起来的感觉，在台湾真的好幸福哦。
There are international organizations or institutions predicted that Taiwan is going to be hit very hard by this pandemic. But at the end, we not only are able to deal with the pandemic with our own experience, but we also try to provide assistance to other countries. For example, we have donated face masks and ventilators, the thermal machines to other countries. So as long as Taiwan is successful, and as long as Taiwan is willing to help other countries, I think the international community will notice that Taiwan can really help.
In 2020, COVID-19 took over the world, disrupting life in every single country. But Taiwan's epidemic prevention efforts have enabled its people to live a normal life.
2003年我们就有 SARS 的经验，后续我们又有这个禽流感，那又有流感的传播，所以整个台湾的社会对于这种流行病的防疫也好，我们也养成了很多的好的、专业的、有经验的政府的治理人员。
我认为我们的体系健全。第一个，我们有健保，那因为健保，所以让人人可以就医。台湾的人民在第一线有类似的症状，都会去就医，所以我们可以很有效率、很广泛的把病人找出来。
23 million people in Taiwan, they are also put their effort to cope with the COVID-19.
In Grace Liao and Alan Lien's investigation of Taiwan's epidemic prevention strategies, they visited airports, hospitals, data centers, and factories, interviewing countless key persons that explained how measures like border control, home quarantines, and digital fencing worked, and how information communications technology and big data made the system efficient, and the method with which hospitals and PPE supplies were managed to provide people the best protection possible against the new coronavirus. Fighting COVID-19 has been like a marathon, a long, arduous race, one that Taiwan has been winning. Taiwan Can Help is more than a slogan. It's Taiwan's offer to share its experiences in dealing with this deadly, highly infectious disease with the rest of the world.